Hi, welcome back. This is going to be an introduction to a different novel called The Nowhere Girls, which is also a novel that I have, which is complete. I wrote it after I wrote The Poison Hill. It's a bit of a different subject, um, and I will be reading some excerpts from it. So this is the kind of intro. It's set in Yuma, Arizona, from 1964 to 65, at a home for unwed mothers. Um, and it's there are various girls in the home. It kind of goes into them, but the main character is named Rachel Rosenberg, um, and the novel itself goes between Rachel in the home getting along with the other girls, and there's some subplots and things going on with the other girls, and Rachel's flashbacks to her relationship with her boyfriend, which led to her being in the home. Rachel is 17, um, and also her relationship with her mother. And I kind of, I don't know, sometimes you need a ghost in a story. Um, it doesn't have to be a real ghost. So Rachel's mother is a psychic. She works, but her second job is just sort of doing readings for people. Um, Rachel herself doesn't like that. She finds it embarrassing, and she refers to the people who come to visit her mother for readings as kooks. Um, her mother is very repressed and sort of emotionally distant, so it's not a happy relationship. Although her mother loves her mother just doesn't show it. Um, and all she really knows about her mother ground is her mother grew up in an orphanage. So throughout the story, as she's coming to terms with what's going on in the unwed mother's home, she's also trying to come to terms with her mother and what her mother's background and what that has to do with her. Um, she early in the book she calls Ebb and asks him to come and rescue her, and she kind of has like an idea that they'll just ride in and they'll go somewhere. Um, and then he kind of stalls, and eventually he does come, and it doesn't work out, and she really then has to figure out if she's going to give the baby up for adoption or not. Just to zoom out a little, context. Um, so the idea of girls and adoption and adopting babies. Um, Adoption was unusual in the United States, probably up to about World War II, maybe a little before that. It was kind of believed before that if you had a baby out of wedlock, um, giving away the baby was sort of cheating. That you had sinned, and the baby was the consequence of your sin and your visible sign, and you should be forced to live with it and raise it. Which people still think that way now sometimes too. Um, Although I wouldn't be the baby if that were me. Um, but so there were a number of unwed mothers' homes, and they were often concentrated on helping the girls get training and work so they could work and support the kid. There was a widespread assumption that if you had a child out of wedlock, you would probably never get married because no man wants to raise another man's child. That probably wasn't true in real life, but it was a belief. Or if you did marry, it would be like a second best kind of situation or something like that. I mean, your life was over basically. Um, One of the reasons people didn't like to adopt is they had a sort of a belief in bad blood. If your grandfather was a horse thief, you'd be a horse thief. So if you had this child who was out of wedlock, you'd have bad blood, and it would all come out. And anyway, um, one of the things that changed that was that Hollywood. Um, a lot of actresses adopted. And the reason they did that was because, quite simply, in those days, major actresses belonged to the studio. The studio wanted them making money, making films 2, 3 times a year. Don't get pregnant. Don't raise the baby. You can't make money for us. You can't make movies for us. On the other hand, if you adopt, we can do a nice little photo shoot. You bring the baby home. All everyone says how beautiful it is, and it's good publicity For instance, Joan Crawford, as is well known, adopted her children. Um, Betty Davis had adopted. She had both adopted and natural children. It's really, really common, and there's a lot of Hollywood stories, which are some which are pretty wild about adopting. So this created a market for adoption. It created an impression upon middle class people that maybe adopting isn't so weird. And so when the baby boom kind of kicked in after World War II, a lot of people who could not have children or had not had children began adopting, and that created a market for white babies. And the story with non-whites is quite different. Um, and it created such a market that girls now got pressured. You must give up the baby, and particularly they were told that you can go somewhere, where no one knows you, give up, live in a home, give up the baby, and then you'll just resume your normal life. And there was no more, oh, it's sin, and there was no more, no man will ever want you. This is your secret. You will keep it, and you will never tell anyone. Um, while I was writing this book, I met or overheard or just somehow encountered so many older women who, at one point or another, either they or their sister or someone in their family had ended up in this situation. And many of times they went back and now they're in their 60s and they're trying to find their child and reconnect. Um, and it didn't really change in that end until maybe the late 60s. I had one person who was in my writing group actually, and she said to me, I got pregnant in 1968, and my parents threw me out of the house. My brother was the only one who would speak to me, but I kept him, I raised him, and I got married, and we were very happy. We were a happy family. So around the end of the 60s and beginning of the 70s, um, there was less of a, it was more acceptable to keep your baby, as of course many people do today. Um, and then, things changed with Roe v. Wade and things like that. My own family history is part of this because my brother, my younger brother, is adopted. Um, and I think my parents felt that, they had two children and they wanted to maybe give a home to a child who wasn't wanted. And, it's the family life is family life, but they did it. And it wasn't until many, many years later that I thought to myself, what if his mother is out there looking for him? To my knowledge, he's never looked. And I never thought of the mother and what she might have gone through. So, um, yeah. Anyway, because of that, I think adoption is actually a great alternative if a person is prepared to do it. But it is an industry that's subject to abuse, and there's a long history of abuse. Um, so, anyway, I get into a little bit of that in the book, and why the girls talk a lot about they can't go home, they have to give up the babies. And, Rachel even says at some point she kind of knows which girls are going to look for their babies and which ones aren't. Um, Anyway, I will be reading some excerpts from it. So just kind of stay tuned.